Welcome to our channel. We're so glad you're here with us today. Before we dive into this incredible story, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories reach. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful tale you won't want to miss. Trust me, it's going to be one you'll remember. So sit back, relax, and let's get into today's story. A little girl's hidden signal to the royal guard stops the parade. You won't believe what happens next. During the changing of the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace, the morning sun gleamed down on the historic grounds, casting long shadows and creating a sense of anticipation. Tourists gathered in droves, their cameras raised high, eager to capture the timeless tradition. Children perched on their parents' shoulders, giggling with excitement, while tour guides explained the history behind the ceremony. "This is more than just a show," one guide told the crowd. "These guards are active duty soldiers, some of whom have served in combat zones." Among the crowd, a little girl named Lily Davis, barely 7 years old, stood rigidly still, her small frame trembling ever so slightly. Her hand was trapped in the tight grip of her stepfather, Sam Davis, who seemed to pay little attention to the world around him. While other children bounced and laughed, Lily's posture remained unnaturally stiff. Her eyes darted nervously between the guards and her stepfather, a look of quiet desperation hidden beneath the surface. "Stand up straight, Lily," Sam muttered, yanking her arm with a force that made her wince. "Remember what I told you." Lily nodded quickly, trying to comply, but the pain in her shoulder from his tight grip was impossible to ignore. Despite the warmth of the June morning, Lily was dressed in a long-sleeved blue dress, odd for the season. Sam didn't notice as her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the faint yellow bruises that circled her wrist. Instantly, Lily tugged the fabric back down, her eyes wide with practiced fear. "Can I take a picture of the guards, Dad?" she whispered. "Stop asking questions," Sam replied in a tone that was far too cold for a father. "It's Sam," he added, making sure to remind her in a sharp whisper not to call him Dad in public. As the guards marched closer, Lily's eyes, for a brief moment, filled with wonder. She was fascinated by the red uniforms, their precision, and the entire ritual. But it was fleeting. The moment Sam caught her attention, he pulled her close, forcing her to focus on the ground, as if she didn't matter, as if the world around her was invisible. But Sergeant Theo Marwood, a royal guard, had noticed something unusual. His sharp training, honed over years in active duty, had taught him to observe the slightest movements. The contrast between Lily's fear and the stillness of the crowd did not go unnoticed. His eyes caught hers for just a moment, and in that fleeting glance, he recognized something far deeper than simple childlike fear. As the ceremony progressed, Sergeant Chris Williams maintained his position, eyes fixed ahead, his movements precise and disciplined. But in the midst of the marching guards, something unusual caught his attention. It wasn't the excitement of the crowd or the rhythmic sound of boots striking stone. It was the way Lily Carter stood. While the children around her giggled and pointed, mesmerized by the guards' bearskin hats and sharp uniforms, Lily stood frozen, her small body rigid, her eyes darting nervously between the guards and her stepfather. The contrast between her stillness and the lively crowd made something inside Williams click. He had seen this before in war zones, in moments where survival depended on noticing the smallest details. Lily's behavior was too calculated, too careful for a child her age. Her gaze never lingered on the soldiers for long. She'd glance, then immediately avert her eyes. A clear sign that something wasn't right. And then there was her posture. The tension in her shoulders, the way she barely moved, made William's instincts flare. For a moment, their eyes met as he marched past. It was a brief, almost imperceptible glance, but it sent a chill down William's spine. He didn't need to know what was happening in the moment. He knew enough. Her fear wasn't temporary. It was deeper, more ingrained, something that had taken root long before this ceremony. His eyes flickered briefly to Sam Carter, her stepfather, standing just beside her. The man's posture screamed arrogance, his eyes scanning the crowd with little regard for those around him. But when he noticed Lily's distracted gaze, he snapped, pulling her back into line, his grip tightening painfully. The moment Sam adjusted Lily's collar, revealing the distinct bruises on her upper arm, Something inside Williams clicked into place. It wasn't a random accident. This wasn't just a child misbehaving. This was something darker. The pattern of the bruising, the way Lily reacted, the control in Sam's actions, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. This child was in danger. As the formation continued to move, Williams kept his focus, never losing sight of them. He observed how Lily flinched every time Sam's grip tightened, how her movements seemed stiff, like she was afraid to act, afraid to speak. Even as the ceremony carried on with the usual pomp and circumstance, something was wrong. The tension in the air was thick, and Williams felt it, deep in his gut. He knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. He couldn't just stand there following protocol while a child was silently begging for help. The rhythm of the guard's march continued, but for Sergeant Chris Williams, the ceremony had shifted. His mind raced through his training, instincts kicking in, overriding everything else. He knew what he had to do next, and there was no going back. The tension in the air was palpable, a quiet unease building as Sergeant Chris Williams's boots struck the stone with each calculated step. His mind was racing, but his outward demeanor remained calm, precise, and unyielding. But everything inside him screamed that he had to act. Lily Carter was in danger. Her eyes, locked on him with an intensity that shouldn't belong to a 7-year-old, told him everything he needed to know. Something was terribly wrong, and it couldn't wait. As he continued the ceremonial march, Williams subtly adjusted his position, keeping Lily and her stepfather, Sam Carter, in his peripheral vision. Sam's earlier move to pull her collar up had revealed the bruises on her arm, unmistakable signs of abuse. The crowd was oblivious, still lost in the grandeur of the changing of the guard, but Williams couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just an isolated moment. Lily's silent distress was becoming clearer with every passing second. Sam seemed to sense that something was off, his grip tightening on Lily's arm as he pulled her closer to him, his body language shifting from casual to guarded. It wasn't just the physical control he had over her. It was the way he moved, like a predator watching for anyone who might interfere. Lily was becoming more visibly uncomfortable, shrinking into herself as she was pulled away from any potential help. Her gaze flickered between the crowd and Williams, and for a split second, her silent plea was unmistakable. And then it happened. Just as Williams was closing the distance, moving through the crowd with precision, Sam turned, distracted by a jostle from behind. It was enough. Lily, with an almost practiced movement, subtly raised her hand to her face. To most, it would have looked like a harmless gesture, a child brushing hair from her eyes. But to Williams, it was a signal he knew all too well. It was the universal distress sign for help, the signal taught in schools across the country for children in danger. In that instant, Williams didn't hesitate. He broke formation. The echo of his boots hitting the stone pathway was the only sound in the silence that fell over the crowd. People started to murmur, unsure of what was happening. But Williams knew. He moved directly towards Sam and Lily, his eyes fixed on the child, his mission clear. The ceremonial precision he'd maintained for years gave way to something more urgent. His sole focus now was protecting Lily. "Sir," Williams's voice cut through the murmurs, firm and commanding. "I need you to release the child." Sam froze, caught off guard. The air seemed to thicken as the crowd's attention shifted from the ceremony to the confrontation unfolding before them. Williams was no longer just a soldier standing guard. He was a man responding to a cry for help, and nothing was going to stop him now. The moment Sergeant Chris Williams spoke, everything seemed to shift. The ceremonial music faded into the background, and all that remained was the heavy silence hanging between him and Sam Carter. Sam's face twisted from confusion to something darker. His grip on Lily's arm tightened, as if to remind her who was in control. The crowd, still unsure of what was happening, watched in tense silence, cameras now forgotten in their hands. Williams stood firm, his eyes never leaving Lily. The subtle plea still clear in her frightened gaze. "You need to release the child," Williams said again, his voice low but filled with authority. His posture was military perfect, but there was nothing ceremonial about the way he stood now. His instincts had taken over. His eyes flicked briefly to the bruises on Lily's arms, his stomach turning. This wasn't just an overzealous parent. This was something far more sinister. Sam's facade of charm was slipping, his calculated smile now replaced with a dangerous edge. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sam shot back, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "She's fine. She's just a little scared of the ceremony, that's all." But Williams could see it. Lily's small form, her body shaking, her eyes wide with terror, spoke volumes. Sam was lying, and Williams wasn't about to let him get away with it. Before Sam could react, the soft murmurs of the crowd turned into whispers, and a few people began pulling out their phones. The elderly couple, who had witnessed the interaction for the past several minutes, had begun to speak up. The woman's voice cut through the tension. "I've been watching him," she said, her tone unwavering. "That child's terrified. Look at her arms." Her voice was soft, but it carried across the growing crowd. The man beside her stepped forward, his face hardening as he spoke. "We've seen enough. We have it on video." In that instant, Sam's control cracked. His voice rose, desperate and shaky. "You have no right to interfere," he shouted, his hand still gripping Lily roughly. But Williams remained unflinching, his gaze locked onto Sam. "Actually, I do," Williams said calmly. "Protocol requires me to protect her." He turned slightly, catching the eye of a female officer now pushing through the crowd. Officer Emily Wilson was making her way toward them, her presence cutting through the tension like a blade. As she approached, Williams didn't look away from Sam, his tone never wavering. "You'll need to come with us," he said to Sam. The moment the female officer knelt to Lily's level, asking her if she was okay, Lily's eyes flicked nervously between the officer and Sam, but something had changed. The fear was still there, but so was a glimmer of hope, a small spark of trust. Williams had broken the chain. The child's silent plea had been heard. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Officer Wilson asked gently, her voice warm. Lily hesitated for a moment, then looked up at her, and with a quiet voice whispered, "He hurts me. All the time." That was all it took. The moment the words left Lily's lips, the crowd erupted into a mix of gasps and murmurs, the severity of the situation now undeniable. Sam's face drained of color, and in the split second before he could protest, he was surrounded by security officers, each of them moving with the efficiency of professionals trained for moments like this. As they pulled Sam away, his protests growing fainter with every step, Lily remained frozen, her small frame trembling, but now with something new in her eyes, hope. For the first time, she wasn't alone. As Sam was escorted away by security officers, Lily remained in the midst of the growing crowd, her small body trembling with the aftermath of fear. But now, there was something different in her eyes, a flicker of something unfamiliar, something like hope. Sergeant Chris Williams stood off to the side, watching her, his mind still reeling from the moment of decision he had made. He had stepped beyond his role as a guard, driven by the instinct to protect. And it had made all the difference. But he wasn't done yet. The crowd, still buzzing with whispers, parted as Officer Emily Wilson gently led Lily to a quiet corner of the courtyard. Her voice was soft, steady, offering the reassurance that Lily had been craving but hadn't known how to ask for. "You're safe now," she said, her hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. "He can't hurt you anymore." But even as Lily began to relax, there was a hint of worry in her eyes, uncertainty about what came next. Sam had always filled her with fear, had always told her that no one would believe her, that she would end up alone, sent back to him. The promise of safety felt too good to be true. I don't want to go back," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible, her hands clutching her sleeves nervously. Officer Wilson gave her a reassuring smile, though it was clear that the next steps were crucial. "You don't have to worry about that, sweetheart. We're going to make sure you're taken care of. No one will hurt you again." The words offered Lily some comfort, but she couldn't help the fear that still lingered. Her past had been filled with broken promises, with people who said they'd protect her, but didn't. She needed more than just words. She needed someone to show her they meant it. Sergeant Williams walked over, his steps deliberate, and knelt down to Lily's level. His presence, once a symbol of authority, now felt like the only safe constant in the chaos that had just unfolded. "I know you're scared," he said, his voice calm and steady. But you don't have to be anymore. You're not alone. The offer of safety, real safety, was a new concept to Lily. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with confusion, hope, and an emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: trust. "I'd like to adopt you," William said softly. "You'll never have to be afraid again. You'll always have a place to call home." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, Lily felt a real possibility of something different. Not a foster home, not a temporary shelter, but a family. She hesitated, but only for a moment. The thought of being wanted, of being loved, was almost too much to grasp. I, I think I'd like that," she whispered, a fragile smile breaking through her fear. Sergeant Chris Williams nodded, his expression softening. "Then we'll start the paperwork today." For Lily, the journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. She had a protector now, someone who had chosen to act, not just as a guard, but as a person who would stand by her side, no matter the cost. And as they walked together, out of the shadows of fear and into the light of hope, Lily finally understood what it felt like to be safe. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this powerful story. What do you think about the moment when Sergeant Williams decided to break protocol and step in protect Lily? It's not easy to make a choice like that, but it shows the importance of listening to our instincts and standing up for others when they need us the most. What would you have done in his shoes? Do you believe that small actions, like recognizing distress signals, can truly change someone's life? Also, we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? We love connecting with viewers from all around the world, and it's amazing to see how this story resonates with people from different places. Share your thoughts, ask questions, or even tell us about a time when you've had to stand up for someone else. Your voice matters, and we're here to create a space where we can share these powerful moments together. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Tomorrow, we have another incredible story coming your way, and we wouldn't want you to miss it. Hit the bell icon so you'll always be the first to know when a new video is live. Thanks for watching, and we can't wait to hear what you think.